This is part 2, episode 65. All you young men, please make your preparations. There will be 39 beams of light appearing from the lake later. Those who are closest to our sea gods fairies will be first to participate in the first segment, while the students at the back might not be able to obtain suitable rankings in the first segment. That's why it's important to be alert. No matter what method you use, you must find a spot on the water lilies illuminated by the beams of light. However, you must not land in the water. Those who do will be disqualified. His explanation was very clear. Most of the young men were already raring to go. Hui Yuhao seemed to sense something. As he turned, he saw Dai Huabin throwing a look at him. Dai Huabin's gaze was cold and fierce. Hui Yuhao smiled. He wasn't bothered. Everyone be prepared. 3, 2, 1. On the other side, Bei Bei was already counting down. Begin. 39 beams of light shot out from the lake. These 39 beams of light formed 3 neat rows, each row 5 meters away from the next. They were spread out proportionately on the lake surface 100 meters away from the female students, and around 200 meters away from the shore. As Bei Bei shouted, everyone on the shore started to act. Those who had an obvious advantage were the soul masters with flying-type martial souls. Fortunately, only 4 out of the 39 male students unleashed their martial souls. They flew into the air and rushed swiftly towards the center of the lake. Their soul rings shone brightly, and were very clear above the lake under the night sky. Hui Yuhao lifted his head to watch, and was in awe. They were indeed seniors from the inner courtyard. Out of the 4, 2 of them were 7-ringed soul sages, and had 2 yellow, 2 purple and 3 black soul rings, the best combination of soul rings that could normally be achieved. The other 2 had 6 rings, and their 6 rings were also the optimal combination of colors. As the 4 of them charged forward, they turned into 4 streaks of light. The rest of the students also showed off their moves. The shore started to shine brightly with soul rings. It was like a huge batch of fireworks had been released. Hui Yuhao, Hikaitu, and Shu Sancha were naturally unwilling to lag behind. Hui Yuhao and Hikaitu acted at the same time. The 2 of them lifted off the ground, and their soul thrusters were activated. The strong thrusting force propelled them forward fast enough to surpass their seniors, even though they had lower cultivations. The explosive speed of their soul thrusters was great, but they couldn't last long. Otherwise, their soul power would be greatly depleted, and the soul thrusters wouldn't be able to take it either. It was possible to travel 200 meters in the air, but not on the ground. On the one hand, the depletion was too great. On the other hand, there wasn't sufficient space, and it was difficult to control their movements at that speed. So Hui Yuhao and Hikaitu used their flying-type soul tools as they activated their soul thrusters, lighting them up. Although their martial souls couldn't fly, there wasn't much difference from using their flying-type soul tools instead. They zipped straight towards the center of the lake. However, they were using external forces to help them fly, and needed some time to pour in their soul power and control their soul tools. Although they were very quick, they didn't end up in advantageous spots compared to the other inner courtyard students, who had unleashed all sorts of moves. As Hui Yuhao and Hikaitu were closing in on the 39 streaks of light, someone had already landed on a water lily in the first row. The water lilies were very obvious on the lake surface. The lilies looked fresh and invigorating under the illumination of the strong lights below them. They were azure green, like jade floating on the water's surface. They appeared very enchanting floating in the background of the surrounding white lights. All the inner courtyard students started to burst out in laughter after seeing his clown-like expression. While Shu Sancha was considered a junior of the inner courtyard, he had risen extremely fast along with Bei Bei. He was also a very friendly person. Almost everyone knew who he was, and how he'd been rejected by Jiang Nan Nan again and again. The soul sage who was feeling down started to laugh. You wait and see. Even if Nan Nan chooses you, I'm going to challenge you for her. Surely not, are you serious? Eldest senior sister, someone's threatening me. Furthermore, he should be your biggest fan if I don't remember incorrectly. Are you going to discipline him? Shu Sancha wore an exaggerated expression as he exclaimed towards Zhong Leshuan. Zhong Leshuan laughed and said, Sancha, stop fooling around. As she spoke, everyone on the lake could hear her clearly. But her voice wasn't piercing, she just sounded like she was talking to everyone. When the male students heard her, they started to stand straight. It was as if they were afraid of leaving a bad impression in her mind. In the inner courtyard, Zhong Leshuan had absolute authority among the students. Not only was she strong, but her personality was also very nice. She was never stingy in helping the other students. She was gentle, virtuous, and was the goddess in many of the students' hearts. As she opened her mouth, even Xu Sanxia stopped speaking, and wore an obsequious smile on his face. Zhong Leshuan was amused as she said, although Sanxia played tricks, he's only doing this for his happiness. Furthermore, all of you have the right to do anything you want. It's just that you're not as cunning as him. This is only the first segment. We'll need all of you to cooperate. Don't end up not even seeing the ladies' faces. If that happens, you're going to suffer at the back. Bei Bei, let's begin, okay. Bei Bei acknowledged her words and said, Sea God's fate above Sea God's lake. It's time for the annual Sea God's fate. I believe everyone has been waiting for a long time. There are 5 segments to this blind date. Everyone please be prepared. Let me reiterate again, if you drop into the water, you will be disqualified. Zhong Leshuan added, we'll judge the prettiest sea god's fairy and the luckiest male student. However, you need to lift the veils of the fairies first. Hua Yuhao stepped onto the water lily. The load-bearing capacity of the water lily was rather impressive. As long as he gathered his soul power, he should be able to stand steadily on the water lily given his cultivation. However, the prerequisite was that he didn't move unnecessarily or wildly. He wasn't listening to Zhong Leshuan and Bei Bei seriously at this point. He only activated his spiritual detection to count the number of people. Nice. There were already cheers coming from the male students. There was a reason why Xu Sanxia moved forward with this method. By using the shield to bear his weight, he could conserve his soul power. Furthermore, he could advance forward more steadily. If he used his shield to strike the water's surface before rebounding just like before, he would only have one chance to show himself when he reached the female students even though he could continue to advance. Xu Sanxia had put in some effort to get first place. Since he was first in this segment, he wouldn't give up this opportunity to show off, Nan Nan, I'm coming. As he shouted, the shield increased its speed, until he was bursting towards the female students rapidly. When he was around 10 meters away, he used his palms to control the shield and made it stop. He used the controlling crane capturing dragon immaculately. He wasn't anxious at all, and observed each of the ladies seriously from left to right. As he looked, he mumbled, that isn't her, she's too fat. That isn't her either, too thin. This one has a good figure. However, she's slightly larger than Nan Nan. No. A sharp voice suddenly resonated from among the female students, Xu Sanxia, if you wanted to be thrown into the water, just say so. Oops. I was wrong. Xu Sanxia shut his mouth immediately. In this short period of time, he had already locked onto his target. The shield moved once again, propelling his body towards the female student third from the right. That female student moved slightly. Xu Sanxia was getting close to her. He was now less than 10 meters from her. He pointed his toes on his shield before he jumped straight towards the water lily that she was standing on. She evidently couldn't take it anymore. She pointed her toes toward the center of the water lily, which could bear the greatest load, and propelled her entire body upwards. She lifted her right leg up high, so high that her toes were above her head. Her legs formed a straight line, and her white dress was lifted up. Ooh, oh! The other male students started to whistle. However, they were disappointed when they realized that she was wearing long pants underneath her dress. She slammed her leg down towards Xu Sanxia. While the rule stated that a female student couldn't directly attack in the first segment, they did allow a female student to counterattack if a male student came too close to their water lily. That was why most male students would choose to attack from a distance in this segment. If the female students were confident in their looks, they wouldn't resist too much. Who wouldn't want to reveal their beauty? It was very rare for someone to be attacked directly like Xu Sanxia was. Xu Sanxia did something unexpected as the leg came crashing down towards him. He didn't block or dodge the attack. He allowed her leg to slash down onto his shoulder. That female student hadn't expected Xu Sanxia to receive her attack without dodging. While she hadn't used any soul skills, she had still exhibited her great strength. When she slashed down onto Xu Sanxia's shoulder, a deep groan was heard. Xu Sanxia tolerated the pain. Xu Sanxia lifted her leg and said affectionately, Nan Nan, I love you. I won't retaliate even if you scold or hit me, get lost. The female student roared furiously and retracted her right leg. Xu Sanxia was originally holding her leg tightly, but he let go at this moment. As she fell backward, her center of gravity changed. However, she was pretty impressive. Her other leg seemed to be stuck to the water lily. As she stretched backward, her hands pressed against the water lily before she flipped over. It was water below the lily, and Shusancha was also standing on top of it. This wasn't considered a tough move on land, but one had to possess immaculate control in order to perform this move on water. While she managed to flip over, her bamboo hat fell. Shusanchi's figure flashed before he jumped up from the water lily. He avoided the scissor kick that the female student unleashed towards him, and his right hand reached for her veil and pulled at it. In the end, he got both the hat and the veil. Shusancha was already standing on the shield by this time. He smiled as he looked at the lady. "I only have eyes for you. Nan, I love you." As he spoke, his shield had already carved a path and guided him back to his original position. Yes, it was Jiang Nan standing on the lily third from the right. Her purplish hair rested on her shoulder and her face had turned slightly red from anger. After 2 years, Jiang Nan had developed much better than ever. Her ravishing looks were accentuated by the dim golden light around her. Her slender figure was almost perfect, and her eyes were filled with fury as she glared at Shusancha. After seeing Shusanchi's high-profile performance, Zhong Lushuan revealed a grin on her face. She looked at Bei Bei, who was smiling and looking at Shusancha. It was evident that he was already used to his style. "Yi Liu, it's your turn now," Zhong Lushuan said. There were many participants in the Sea God's Fate, and there were even 4 more segments. Although all of them were talented soul masters, and their cultivations weren't weak, it wasn't easy trying to balance themselves on the water lilies. They had to seize their time well. Yi Liu was around 27 or 28 years old. After hearing Zhong Lushuan calling his name, he immediately nodded to acknowledge her before lifting his body into the air. A pair of beautiful, white wings were unleashed behind his back. His figure was very proportionate. When his wings flapped, he flew towards the 17 female students elegantly. Jiang Nan had regained her calm by now. She didn't look at Shusancha, but turned her attention to Huiyu Hao. She shot him an angry look. It was evident that she had now discovered his role in this. How was Shusancha able to take off her hat and veil so easily on his own? Huiyu Hao only smiled back. 100 meters was a very short distance to fly. Yi Liu drifted in the air and was about to reach the ladies. His wings started to flap in the direction of the water's surface and his 7 soul rings shone brightly. Suddenly, strong winds started to rage above the sea god's lake. As his wings flapped, the winds gave rise to a huge wave that approached the female students. Yi Liu revealed a delighted smile on his face. If the ladies were hit by his wave, they were all bound to be drenched. Not only would it be easy to identify them then, but it would also be a feast for his eyes. However, at this point, someone in the center shouted, "Yi Liu, you shameless." Then she lifted her right hand, she struck outward with her palm. 7 soul rings also rose from her feet, and a surging wave of fire was unleashed. This fire instantly turned into a sea of fire, resisting the water that came their way. The wave was resisted just like that. Mist started to rise, the surging wave had been vaporized instantly. Huiyu Hao heard a senior muttering softly, "Impressive. This is the Golden Crow primordial fire. I didn't expect Wu Ming to be involved in this blind date too." Although Huiyu Hao didn't know what the Golden Crow primordial fire was, he could sense the intense heat from the golden red flames. It was even comparable to Ma Xiaotao's phoenix flames. Next to the student that had unleashed the Golden Crow primordial fire, another female student shouted furiously, "What a pervert. Eldest senior sister, I'm making a move." Zhong Lushuan snorted and replied, "What was your purpose in making that wave? Didn't Ruoruo mention it just now? Your intention was a perverted one, which means that you've flouted the rules. Swim back to shore by yourself. You're disqualified." Yi Liu was indignant, but he couldn't say anything more in front of Zhong Lushuan. He could only swim back to shore. Huiyu Hao twisted his head to look at Hikaitu, who was also looking back at him. The two of them swallowed their saliva at the same time. This blind date is a little intense. Are these ladies really here for a blind date? Hikaitu said softly, "Didn't eldest senior brother mention that the first segment was very safe? Why don't I feel that way?" Huiyu Hao laughed bitterly. "I don't think so either. The senior over there is so fierce, and she even has 8 rings. Second senior, I'm a little scared." Hikaitu laughed softly, "Scared my foot? Maybe some ladies are into you." Huiyu Hao turned to the senior on the other side who was around 27 or 28 years old and asked, "Senior, who were those 2 seniors just now?" You seem to know them. Zhong Leshuan laughed as she said, Hey, are all of you croakers? Why are all of you going to the side? For love, you must be willing to go all out. Otherwise, how can you win the heart of the lady you love? Under her encouragement, the next few men performed much better. Although they were still a little lacking, they performed much better than before. 2 hats were taken down, which revealed the faces of 2 pleasant ladies. Out of the 17 female students, 3 of them now had their faces exposed. When it came to the senior before Hui Yuhao, he gave Hui Yuhao a victory sign before he embarked on his turn. He leapt out from his spot. After their previous interaction, Hui Yuhao had learned that this senior had a very domineering name. He was called Chu Qingtian. His 6 soul rings flashed brightly as his toes touched the water surface. He moved frighteningly fast. Under the illumination of his soul rings, it was possible to spot brownish-yellow hairs sprouting from his body. Panther-type martial soul? Hui Yuhao was slightly impressed. At this point, Chu Qingtian had already burst out in front of the female students. He went straight towards Han Ruoruo, who had unleashed the dazzling golden rope earlier. As he made this move, he invited the cheers of the other male students. Chu Qingtian's figure flashed, and he reached her side in an instant. As he extended his hand, he grabbed at Han Ruoruo's veil. You're daring. Han Ruoruo snorted and lifted her right hand, trying to block him. But Chu Qingtian didn't clash with her directly. Given that their cultivations were very far apart, it wasn't wise for him to do so. His 3rd soul ring started to shine, and countless bolts of electricity started to surround him. As the bolts of electricity flashed, he suddenly disappeared. It was as if he had fused with the electricity. What? Han Ruoruo exclaimed in confusion. Her dazzling golden rope appeared instantly, and turned into golden rings that surrounded her. The flashing electricity was extinguished by her golden light. However, she wasn't the only target of the flashing bolts of electricity. They scattered in all directions. Some of them even flew towards the Golden Crow Holy Lady, Wu Ming. Wu Ming subconsciously lifted her hand, and a layer of golden red fire spread. It formed a barrier around her. At this point, a larger bolt of electricity jerked, and seemed to solidify. It managed to penetrate the defensive layer mounted by the Golden Crow primordial fire. A hand extended from the bolt of electricity and pulled Wu Ming's hat down. Wu Ming was surrounded by her Golden Crow primordial fire. As her hat was pulled, it was turned into ashes by the fire, revealing her face. Although Chu Qingtian did tell Hui Yuhao that this Golden Crow Holy Lady was already more than 30, she looked like she was only 25 or 26 years old. Although she wasn't as beautiful as Jiang Nan, she was still very pretty, and could be considered a beauty. Chu Qingtian retracted his smile and said to Hui Yuhao softly, Why do I feel like something's not right? Hui Yuhao gasped, What's wrong? Senior, you were really fast just now. Did you fuse your soul skill into your lightning? Chu Qingtian didn't hide the truth, and nodded. He said, My martial soul is a berserk lightning panther. Usually, soul masters with lightning abilities use them to attack. However, I don't do so. Instead, I use them to increase my speed. I can fuse into lightning and increase my speed significantly. That's why everyone calls me the demonic berserk lightning panther. In terms of abilities, I can't compare to those two. However, no one is faster than me in the inner courtyard. There weren't any weaklings in the inner courtyard. Hui Yuhao deeply understood this sentence once again. My friend, you've got to try your best too. Chu Qingtian said to Hui Yuhao. Hui Yuhao was stunned and asked, Me? Try my best for what? Chu Qingtian was speechless. You've just entered the inner courtyard, right? Hui Yuhao nodded and answered, I was granted special permission to enter the inner courtyard. Chu Qingtian said, I can tell just by looking at your age. Don't be worried, it's your turn. Hui Yuhao just now realized that it was his turn. As he turned around to look at Bei Bei gestured encouragingly towards him. Hui Yuhao, don't be nervous. Just do your best. Zhong Leshuan smiled as she encouraged him. At the same time, she turned to the female students and said, This is the youngest out of all the male students today. Don't be merciful on him though. Feminine laughter resonated, and Wu Ming started to laugh. Little fellow, why are you here when you are so young? Come on, try taking down Sister Ruoruo's hat. She likes younger boys. Minga, do you want to die? Han Ruoruo said coquettishly. She also drew laughter from the rest of the young women. Hui Yuhao was a little awkward now. He was at a loss, as he didn't know whether to go or not. After all, this was his first experience. Bei Bei said, "You have, do your best, all right." Hui Yuhao acknowledged his words and stepped out from his water lily. He was different from the rest of the male students. The rest of them burst forward immediately, but he didn't. He even looked a little slow. He took a step forward and stepped onto the water. He floated above the surface and started to walk towards the female students. The students on both sides that were laughing cheekily and ready to watch a good show started to quiet down. They were stunned as they watched this junior of theirs. Hui Yuhao's movements weren't quick, but they were steady. He maintained a stable rhythm as he advanced over the water, not even causing a ripple. It was like he was part of the water. Hui Yuhao couldn't directly stand on the water, of course. That was only achievable by a flying-type soul master with at least a 7-ringed cultivation, and naturally he didn't have 7 rings yet. As he walked on the water, he left a trail of ice behind him. With his control over his soul power, he was able to walk freely on top of the ice. At the same time, this didn't deplete his soul power too much. This was the ultimate ice. Although Hui Yuhao wasn't fast, 100 meters wasn't a long distance either. He only stopped when he was around 15 meters from the young women. The female students were able to clearly make out his appearance once he got closer. They could tell that while Hui Yuhao wasn't old, he seemed very mature, even more so than most of the male students earlier. His eyes were also exceedingly clear. Although he wasn't particularly handsome, there was a certain aura surrounding him. "Snow Lady, come on out," Hui Yuhao suddenly called out. Suddenly, a streak of orangish gold light emerged from his body. Amidst the pitch-black darkness of night, the lights from soul rings were already very dazzling. However, this orangish gold light was even more dazzling. When this orangish gold light appeared, the beams of light beneath the female student seemed to dim in comparison. After a moment, the Snow Lady drifted in front of Hui Yuhao. Still engulfed in the orangish gold light, she turned to look at Hui Yuhao and rubbed her eyes sleepily with her small, white hands. She was evidently not fully awake yet. "Wow, even a kid's here for a blind date," an unknown female student exclaimed. Han Ruoruo said, "Don't spout nonsense, that's no ordinary kid." Hui Yuhao was telepathically connected to the Snow Lady and caressed her head. When the Snow Lady saw the surrounding lights, she blinked and was instantly jolted awake. A look of excitement had appeared in her deep blue eyes. The Snow Lady shouted. Hui Yuhao didn't open his mouth to speak. Rather, he directly communicated with her through his mind. The Snow Lady shouted again, then flew towards the ladies. Her first target was Han Ruoruo, who stood in the center. She had snow-white skin, a feeling of delicateness, and was adorably chubby. Her big, beautiful eyes even seemed capable of reflecting the stars in the sky. Back when she'd been in the Clear Sky sect, even the 2 sect masters hadn't been able to resist her charms. These young ladies were no exception. "Wow, so cute. Come on over, come on over." Wu Ming was the first to gesture towards the Snow Lady. The Snow Lady laughed mischievously, but continued towards Han Ruoruo. "Yaya." She said to Han Ruoruo before extending her arms, as if she was asking for a hug. Women all had maternal instincts, especially Wu Ming and Han Ruoruo, who were over 30 years old. Their maternal instincts had kicked in the moment they saw the cute Snow Lady. Han Ruoruo didn't even hesitate before opening her arms wide and hugging the Snow Lady. The Snow Lady's body was fresh and cool, and her skin was soft and elastic. Han Ruoruo couldn't help but let out a comfortable sigh. Hugging the Snow Lady felt so great. Even though Han Ruoruo knew that she wasn't an ordinary kid, she couldn't help but comment, "Why didn't you dress her in warmer clothes? Her body feels so cold." Hui Yuhao laughed bitterly. "I can't decide what she wears." The Snow Lady created her own clothes. It wasn't something that Hui Yuhao could decide. Furthermore, the Snow Lady was a spirit converted from the Ice Sky Snow Lady. Of course her body was cold. The Snow Lady gave Han Ruoruo a hug and then crawled out from her arms. She turned to look at Hui Yuhao before turning to look at Han Ruoruo with a pitiful expression on her face and lifted her pinky to point at the hat above Han Ruoruo's head and exclaimed once again. After that, she lowered her head and wore an indignant look on her face. She pointed her 2 index fingers in front of her. She was the picture of cuteness. No matter how tough Han Ruoruo was, she instantly became gentle in front of the Snow Lady. Although she couldn't understand what the Snow Lady was saying, she understood what she was trying to convey through her actions. All right, don't be sad. I'll take it off." Once she'd finished speaking, she lifted her hand and took off her hat. Her appearance was exposed immediately. Han Ruoruo appeared much younger than her age and was a beauty. Her eyes were pitch black and her face was thin, but at this moment, her eyes were full of gentleness as she reached out in front of the Snow Lady. After Han Ruoruo removed her hat, the Snow Lady laughed and pecked her cheek. She then flipped around and made her way towards a female student off to Han Ruoruo's side. Freeabnovel.com. She proceeded to do the same as before. She pointed at the female student's hat and exclaimed pitifully. Afterwards, she lowered her head and pointed her index fingers in front of her. At this point, it wasn't just the female students who were stunned. The elders, teachers, and male students were all stunned as they watched this strange scene. Bei Bei's eyes widened, while Zhong Lishuan was moved. Her eyes were filled with a sense of gentleness. Without a doubt, she would have made the same choice as Han Ruoruo if she'd been in her place. The second hat was removed just like that as another female student revealed their appearance. Hui Yuhao was surprised to find out that he knew this female student. She was the Ice-type Soul Master that had fought alongside him in the Elite Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament, Ling Luochen. The Snow Lady laughed cheekily and gave her a peck too. Ling Luochen seemed to be in a daze as she looked at the Snow Lady. She then looked at Hui Yuhao again, a gaze filled with doubt, as if she was asking Hui Yuhao, "What's going on?" The Snow Lady's charm was invincible. She used the same method on 3 more female students, succeeding every time. 3 more female students had their appearances exposed, just like that. Hui Yuhao was surprised to find out that he knew 2 of them. Xiao Xiao was beside Ling Luochen. After 2.5 years, Xiao Xiao's appearance had changed drastically. She was much better looking than before. As she was only a little older than Hui Yuhao, she'd still seemed very undeveloped 2 years ago. However, she was a head taller now, although her figure was relatively still the same. This was the classic post-puberty look. Her ravishing looks had also become even prettier as she developed. She'd succumbed under the Snow Lady's charm and had even stretched out her arms to hug her a second time, but the Snow Lady had avoided her. When she'd almost fallen into the water because of her carelessness. She was only saved by the Snow Lady, who gave her a helping hand. The other female student Hui Yuhao recognized wasn't a close friend. She had long, scarlet hair and a cool expression. She was Wu Feng, who possessed the Red Dragon. Wu Feng had naturally possessed a slender figure, but it was devilish now. Her curves were definitely the most exaggerated amongst the 17 female students. Her figure was similar to Ma Xiaotao's figure from before. She appeared a little stunned as she looked at the Snow Lady. When she turned to look at Hui Yuhao, she appeared as unfriendly as ever. Even though she was quite hot-tempered, even she'd evidently become gentler when her gaze met the Snow Lady's deep blue eyes. 5 female students had already fallen for the Snow Lady's charm. The first 11 male students couldn't even compare to Hui Yuhao when it came to the number of hats he'd removed. Snow Lady, come back. Hui Yuhao hadn't wanted to take down this many hats. It was embarrassing. So many people were currently looking at the pair of them. He had to at least give the other male students a chance. If he took down all of the hats, he'd certainly steal the limelight. However, he was still bound to become everyone's target. The Snow Lady laughed and flipped through the air as she returned to Hui Yuhao's side. She then sat on his shoulder and started to play with his hair. Hui Yuhao smiled and bowed towards the female students. Seniors, apologies for the offense. Hey, you're Hui Yuhao, right? What's with this little lady? You owe us an explanation. Wu Ming couldn't help but ask. Everyone looked at him eagerly, regardless of whether their hats had been taken off or not. Hui Yuhao smiled mysteriously and said, "Today is the Sea God's fate. I can't possibly delay everyone now. I'll explain everything once the event ends. I can only say that all of you can possibly own someone like the Snow Lady in the future, if you're willing." Once he'd finished speaking, he slowly retreated across the water. He only turned around after retreating a few steps. He lightly crossed the water surface as he quickly returned to the water lily that he was on previously. All the male students' gazes followed him back. They could also see the Snow Lady clearly as he got closer. Xu Qingqian gave Hui Yuhao a thumbs up as she said, "My friend, you're quite impressive. You took off 5 hats easily. In my opinion, you would have been able to take off all their hats if you wanted to. You're too strong. Furthermore, you didn't just take off their hats, you also left a good impression on all of them. No wonder you were able to enter the inner courtyard at such a young age. Impressive." Hui Yuhao smiled and didn't send the Snow Lady back inside of him. He said to Chu Qingtian, "I was just playing tricks, brother Chu." Chu Qingtian also laughed. "Playing tricks? I want to play tricks just like you, but I need that cute little girl that you have. What is she exactly? Well, you how didn't beat around the bush this time." He could clearly tell that the male students were all eager to hear his explanation. He replied, "She's a spirit. How do I put this? She's a special life that I created because of a twist of fate. She's like a body of energy that combined with my spiritual mind, and who's slightly connected to me by blood. Simply put, she's another form of soul ring that possesses life. She's my partner." After he said this, everyone became shocked. They were all talented students from Shrek Academy, and most of them were from the martial soul department. Their understanding of a soul master's capabilities were all very deep. However, none of them knew that soul masters could possess such a life existence. The Snow Lady was an existence that soul rings couldn't compare to. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.